All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Pursuit of Balance. Today, we're going to talk about fiber, how much we should be taking in, why we should be taking it in, the benefits of taking it in, different types of fiber, and, anything else that just naturally evolves from that question, right? So, I had this come up with a client of mine, and we were just talking about, fiber, and, always like my general suggestion for nutrition is just like focus on fiber, focus on protein. And I love the approach mentally to thinking about what I'm not getting enough of and just naturally as a byproduct letting everything else kind of just dwindle down, because you realize how fast, like, it's hard to eat a lot of enough of the right things, and when you have to focus on eating more of the right things, you naturally are just going to get a drop in everything else around it, right? So that's kind of where this conversation started. It's like, okay, well, where are we getting fiber? Most of us obviously know we think about plant foods, but we're going to talk about, soluble and insoluble and different types of it. But the first thing to start off with is just kind of the amounts, right? So as a male, I generally like a good goal to be around 35 grams of fiber a day. And as a female, I generally like it to be around 25 grams, right? So getting that is kind of a goal intake for you is always going to be like a great starting point, because when you think about this concept of protein and fiber and keeping all of your mental energy on focus on building out those two spaces, naturally everything else kind of falls to the wayside. Because here's the one thing about fiber. Fiber comes from whole foods. It comes from plant foods, right? So in order to get those, you need to be eating a lot of it. And I'm going to go over some basic things that I wrote down on, like, how much is a general, a cup of berries, or how much is a cup of broccoli, and like how much fiber am I getting from it, because you'll realize that it's actually not that easy to do. And then this is something I would say for me personally, especially in the winter months or kind of the colder months, I have a harder time doing, because in the summertime, I think it's easy for me to just get enough protein or fiber in through the diet just because I'm eating so much fruit. But it is not an easy goal to hit, right? But then when you look at the protein, it's the same exact thing, right? So it's like if most of us are focusing on 1 gram per pound of our goal body weight, right? So let's say I'm 200 pounds and I want to be 160. I'm eating for 160 grams of protein a day. A female could probably be closer to the 0.8 mark. But generally, if we say for all of us, like 0.8 to 1 gram of your total goal body weight is kind of the thing, you realize how hard it is to hit that number alone, and then also how hard it is at fiber alone. So when you focus on your approach to nutrition overall, being around hitting my fiber goal and hitting my protein goal, you will realize how hard it is to do through convenience food or eating out or doing things like that. Like, you almost have to home cook. You almost have to be, a little bit more preparatory with the meals that you're creating for yourself just to be able to hit those things. So I kind of want to start off with, just obviously some of the benefits, but then really the types of fiber, right? So 2 main types of fiber. I'm just going to read off some of the notes that I have. Soluble fiber. When you think about soluble fiber, this is something that if I were to put like in a glass of water, it would dissolve, right? So these are going to be the things that you'll see a lot with like fruits, obviously some lentils in there, some peas, some strawberries, carrots, flax seeds. There's a big list of things that we can obviously read here, but they turn into like a gel-like substance in the digestive tract, right? So these are the things that when you think about people talking about fiber lowering cholesterol and lowering blood sugar, that comes from more soluble fiber, right? So these are the things that actually break down, right? When you look at insoluble fiber, these are going to be the things that when we think about digestive and helping up build up bulk in the digestive tract and helping with stool and things like that. And you get this a lot through like whole grains, you get this through some nuts, you get this through some vegetables, you get this through a lot of vegetables that obviously have the skin on. And this is why one of the things you'll see with a lot of kind of dietary suggestions or nutrition tips is always like, hey, keep the skin on too. It's not a bad idea at all, especially from a digestibility perspective. So you think about soluble and insoluble fiber. Those are going to be the 2 types of fiber. And a question I got was like, should I be focusing on more one versus the other? And the answer is no. They're both beneficial to our health. You're going to get a little bit more of like, when you think about the health benefits that people talk about with fiber, which we're going to talk about here in a second, you tend to see more of that through the soluble fiber group. But the insoluble fiber group is going to be something that, I remember this in my like men's physique competitions. I used to take, what was that stuff called? Metamucil? Yeah, it was like Metamucil fiber. That was because we weren't really eating a lot of vegetables. Most of my meals were just like rice and tilapia, or rice and chicken and maybe a cup of broccoli or a little bit of asparagus here and there, but it was like 1 ounce like per meal. Like, it was not a lot. And the goal was not around health. The goal was around, just body composition optimization. So we always had to supplement with fiber, because just how constipated you would get from eating so much food and so little fiber was just a very uncomfortable thing. So a lot of bodybuilders and, everyone in that space understands why you were doing that. But when you think about dietary sources, obviously it's like we all know that like eating a lot of fruit or vegetables or certain types of things, and I think like legumes, like so beans and lentils and things like that in that family. There's some people in the nutrition space that obviously talk about how you should be avoiding those things because they come with a lot of anti-nutrients like lectins and phytates and things like that. But as long as they're prepped correctly, just like most of the other things in the vegetable family that pop up in that conversation, I don't think it's anything to worry about. But as most of us know, like, you know, beans, for example, like they get me very gassy, and certain foods get people very gassy. And that comes with kind of some of the fiber conversation of what we're talking about, right? So next part, I kind of started jotting down some stuff. It's like, why is fiber so important for us to focus on? And for me, like the number one thing as a byproduct indirectly without even thinking about it is when you focus on fiber, majority of the time you're going to end up just making an unconscious choice to focus more on whole foods. Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of cereals and oatmeal, and there's some foods that are still in this processed group that really kind of promote fiber. Like, hey, it's like you eat these goldfish, you get 3 grams of fiber, and this is like pumped in out of obviously from a processing perspective. But majority of the whole foods or majority of the fiber that you're going to get is going to come from whole foods. So one of my favorite things about focusing on fiber is it naturally gets people to focus on incorporating more plant foods, incorporating more vegetables and fruits into the diet, because there is no research showing against the negative effects of having more vegetables and fruit in the diet, because it just allows for a more balanced approach. And I will say I'm more in the omnivore camp. Like there's some people that are like vegetarian and vegan, then you have the other extreme group, which is just pure carnivore, where all I eat is meat and fat, or keto even a little bit. I believe that having a very balanced approach to eating, but prioritizing whole foods and prioritizing protein and fiber is always going to be a winning bet for everyone, because I think it's going to add enough balance with the food selection that you're eating. It's going to add enough nutrients through the vitamins and the minerals and polyphenols that you'll get from the plant foods. You're going to get some of the zoo nutrients and obviously all the protein and creatine and all the other things you'll get from muscle meat and protein or animal meat. So when you focus on those two things, it's really, really hard to fuck up a good diet. And so number one is promoting digestive health, like what we talked about, right? Like fiber aids in adding the bulk into the stool. It obviously helps with some of just the digestibility of certain foods. So that's obviously number one. It supports weight management. And the reason why it supports weight management, and it doesn't matter if that's weight loss or maintaining, whatever it might be, is fiber is going to help regulate hunger because of like obviously making you feel fuller faster. So when you think about foods, like obviously fat tends to be kind of in part of that conversation for some people, like versus carbs, right? Like carbs tend to be very easy to overeat. And as we all know, when you mix carbs and fats together, that's like just a recipe mentally for overeating. So we want to do things that kind of force you to slow down, right? And I know for myself personally, like vegetables, especially over fruit, tend to do that faster for me. So if I was on a weight loss journey, for example, with myself, or obviously when I'm working with clients, like adding vegetables into the routine is going to be something that's going to help slow you down. So if you're someone that struggles with overeating, we'd rather find strategies that are going to incorporate obviously fiber, not only from the health perspective, but also from the digestive perspective of slowing you down, because that's where a lot of people get into trouble, is they're obviously eating too much too fast, right? Couple things I was talking about, I mentioned earlier, lowering cholesterol and lowering blood sugar. So blood sugar is going to be one of those things that obviously we want to be able to mitigate as much as possible. You know, one thing I will say, not to just fearmonger blood sugar, I did a continuous glucose monitor for a long time. And having your blood sugar go up sometimes is demonized in this space. There's no problem with blood sugar going up. The recovery from it and the baseline and the adaptation back towards it is the thing that you really want to pay attention to. So obviously there's going to be certain foods that are going to make your blood sugar go through the roof, and that's not the end of the world, right? The question is, how do you recover, right? Do you drop below baseline when you do recover, or how long does your blood sugar stay high? So obviously eating fibrous food, soluble fiber, can slow down the absorption of sugar into the bloodstream. So that's just going to be one of those things that's going to help prevent the blood sugar from it. There's even, I forget her name. She has a book on this, but she was kind of the one that got me onto this whole concept of like the order that we eat in is going to be one of those things that's going to actually help from a hunger and overeating and a blood sugar perspective, because when you eat your protein and your fat and your fiber first, you're eating the things that are going to slow down the digestion process. You're eating things that are going to obviously improve satiety, so it's going to help you feel fuller faster. It's going to prevent you overeating on kind of the easy starchier carbs or desserts or whatever else you might get full on that's not going to bring a lot of nutrient value. So really just prioritizing fiber on the front end of your meals, I think, is also one of those big strategies too. So if you have a cup of broccoli and you had a steak and you had a cup of rice or pasta, if you can focus on getting as much of the steak and the broccoli in first and then keeping the rice towards the end, I think mentally it's a strategy that helps you feel like you're not really in this restrictive based approach where it's like, oh, I have to remove these things from my diet. It allows us to keep some of the things that you enjoy there, but it just changes the strategy on how you're approaching it, right? So it's like if I say, no, you don't have to take out rice, you don't have to take out pasta, you don't have to take out bread. Obviously, we want to minimize it because those are foods that allow you to kind of get into a trap where you can maybe overeat or have the potential to overeat and get full of something that doesn't provide a lot of nutrient value. When you eat the fiber, you eat the animal protein first, it obviously kind of solves that problem because naturally you're going to get fuller faster, and the chance of you overeating. And this is why when you go to like restaurants, for example, their whole strategy is not around health. It's around optimizing, cost savings for the restaurant, and then obviously making sure that you feel full so you feel, obviously satisfied and happy when you leave. It's much more, from a cost perspective, easier for me to give you chips and salsa or bread and olive oil or, like what I'm trying to just think of basic things at a restaurant. I eat a lot of Mexican food, Italian food, obviously, so those are the first thing that popped up in my head. But when you get full on that, the problem is like when you get to the actual main entree where all the nutrients are at, where the protein's at, where the vegetables are at, it's very easy for me to underserve you as far as the serving size go, and you would still be happy. If I gave you a 3-ounce steak and that's all I gave you for dinner, it's very easy for you to be like, well, I'm still full. And even in that case, I'd still, like, if I opened up a restaurant, I'd much rather find, like, protein-rich and fiber-rich, like, apps or things that people can snack on, because that's still going to create the same kind of satisfaction that that person is looking for. And if you have room and you're still hungry at that point, then go get yourself some dessert. But a lot of times we're putting that kind of dessert, in a sense, in the front end of it. And that's obviously what kind of is a recipe for disaster. Lowering cholesterol, the way that works, and this is something I actually had to look up because I didn't really know it. Soluble fiber found in things like, obviously, all the fruits and vegetables and oats and beans and things like that can help lower LDL and the bad cholesterol by binding the cholesterol particles to removing them from the body, right? I'm not really sure how this process works, but when I was looking up last night, what are the benefits of fiber and what are the things that we need to know, like that was obviously one of the things that I've heard about, but as far as the mechanism goes, I'm not really sure. And that kind of like, led me down the rabbit hole when I started talking about heart health and all the other things that come from fiber. And I think this just comes back to the same reason of like when you manage blood sugar and you manage cholesterol levels, that obviously is going to lead to better heart health, right? The next one I wrote down is promoting gut health, which is obviously something that we talk about a lot as far as nutrition and health and mood and energy levels and all those good things. Gut health has just been this space that's kind of expanded. And I'm fascinated by it because, like, you think about majority of the serotonin levels in our human body are really made in the gut. So a lot of the stuff as far as mood and energy, too, is kind of cool to see some of the research coming out around that. But really, this comes down to this prebiotic and probiotic and postbiotic and resistant starch and soluble and insoluble, all these foods that feed the gut bacteria, right? There's trillions of bacteria inside the gut, right? We want to do things that feed the good ones, right? So that's kind of what our prebiotic is, or a probiotic, right? And these are the things that kind of, are we feeding the good bacteria, are we feeding the bad gut bacteria? And this is one thing that you guys will notice when you start to transition to a healthier approach of foods and more whole food approach, is in the beginning it's a little hard, but eventually you're going to get to a place where you don't even really crave the bad foods, right? And a lot of that is bacteria related too, because you're giving yourself the stuff, the nutrients that your body needs to really get rid of the cravings, right? Because those cravings are going to be an inherent habit as well. So obviously from a gut health perspective, the prebiotic fuel for the beneficial gut bacteria, fermented fiber in the colon, which is going to produce short chain fatty acids that support colon health and may reduce the risk of colon cancer. One of those things, looked up again. As far as the cancer side and all the other stuff, everything, when I start to look up things for podcasts, I'll come back to this. And I try to speak from as much knowledge of stuff that I know, but a lot of this stuff, is something that I look up. Most of them all say the same shit at the end of the day. They're like, oh, it reduces cancer, or, improves heart health. They're pretty gray statements, right? So I try to find the things that, from a very elementary perspective, mechanistically, why or how do they actually do their job? Okay, and that's really all I have for notes, right? I was just going through some of that stuff. So what I want to finish up with today is kind of give you guys a couple things that I looked up as far as like, okay, I started looking up like how much fiber comes in certain fruits or how much fiber comes in certain vegetables. The one thing that was surprising in a good way, because I eat a lot of it, is, well, number one, people need to understand that avocado is a fruit. Avocado had about 10 grams of fiber per serving, and I think it's a whole medium-sized avocado. I didn't write down what it actually was, but I just wrote down the fiber. Other things that were really cool to see, and this is the thing I was talking to my client, like raspberries had 8 grams of fiber per cup, blackberries had 7 to 8. Apples and pears were pretty big up there. They had about 5 or 6 grams. Apples were 4 to 5 grams. Strawberries had about 3 grams. Bananas had about 3 grams. Oranges had about 3 grams. So if you think about this, like let's just use raspberries and blackberries. If I was a female trying to hit 25 grams of fiber a day, that means I would need to have 4 cups of berries over the course of a day to hit that goal, assuming you're eating 0 vegetables and 0 other fruits. But just to kind of give you guys an idea of like, okay, you told me the goal is 25 grams for a female and 35 grams-ish for a male. And, for some of us going over is not going to be a bad thing either. So if you think about that, if I were to look at apples, that means that I would need to eat 5 apples a day. Once again, this is assuming you're eating 0 other things that have fiber, right? So just to kind of give you guys an idea as far as those things go. And most of those, when you look at the fruit category, are going to be more soluble. Things like apples and pears, when you're eating the skin, those will have a little bit of some insoluble fiber as well. Now, when it comes to vegetables, this is one that I wasn't going to guess, actually, but artichokes had the highest one, and there were 6 to 7 grams of fiber per medium size. Broccoli had about 2.5 grams of fiber per half cup. So I think it was when I was looking up, I was trying to do a cup for each one, so I guess I wrote that wrong. So it was 5 grams then, technically. Brussels sprouts had 2 grams. Sweet potatoes had 4 grams for a medium-sized potato, which is basically like 115 grams total weight. All these things, too, you got to remember, there's a bunch of other nutrients, too. This is something I was talking about when you look at the fiber. It's like trying to figure out the things that provide a lot of vitamins and minerals and polyphenols and all the other health benefits you're going to get outside of just fiber. Today's conversation is obviously more around fiber. Carrots are relatively high in fiber. Those are about 2 grams per medium-sized carrot. And then there's spinach and kale, which had about 2 grams per cup as well. So to give you guys just kind of a general idea. But then there's also things like resistant starch, too, that I briefly talked about to her, which kind of in this conversation as well. Resistant starch, you get like green bananas, for example, or like cooked and cooled like rice and potatoes. Like in some Asian cultures, they serve rice like kind of almost at room temperature. But when the cooking and the cooling happens, it actually builds the resistant starch in the food, and that's something that almost has a probiotic effect on the gut health as well. So we're trying to do things that really optimize gut health and function. We're trying to do things that really optimize nutrient quality and prioritize nutrients in general, right? Because if you can focus on trying to get as much nutrients for the body and being as well-rounded with the approach, from a health perspective, that's obviously going to be most optimal. So protein, very easy. Trying to get 1 gram of your total goal body weight. If you're a female, 0.8 is probably still a great goal, but no worries for you even going a little bit higher. And think about it this way. That is a really, really intense goal. And obviously, majority of that stuff needs to come from animal protein, because plant protein is not only going to come with a small amount of anti-nutrients, which is going to hinder some of the absorption, but it's just really, really, really hard to get that 1 gram per total pound of goal body weight through plants only. Like things like lentils, for example. Lots of fiber, lots of protein, and it is a complete protein, so it has all 9 essential amino acids. But it's really hard to do through plant food. So this is why I always say, if you're doing vegetarian or vegan approach from a health perspective, you are doing the wrong diet, because that's the only one that requires supplementing. You're not getting the L-carnitine, the CLA, the creatine, all the other things that come from what we call zoo nutrients. So protein, ideally, you're trying to prioritize your animal protein. But when you look at animal protein, most of us are eating just muscle meat. We're not eating organs. We're not eating cartilage. We're not getting a nice balanced amino acid profile, some collagen protein. So this is always something I like to say, like, either making more gelatinous foods or eating more cartilage off like the edge of a drumstick for chicken, for example. If not, like supplementing with some collagen protein is going to be a really good idea, or even supplementing with glycine, which is the main amino acid for that too. I do both. I do a scoop of collagen protein and a couple scoops of glycine powder in my coffee. But the rest of it obviously is naturally going to come from muscle meat, seafood, poultry, beef, venison, gamey meats, whatever you want. And then the rest of the diet is just focused on the fiber, right? And if the fiber is going to come from vegetables and fruits, just like I read off, you need to be getting anywhere from 4 to 6 servings of this stuff minimum a day to probably hit that goal. And for most of us, maybe even 6 to 8, depending on kind of what type of food you're selecting. The cool thing about vegetables, especially the greens like asparagus and the broccolis and the artichokes, is they're very low in calories, so it's a great way to get a lot of I don't know what the hell a word I'm looking for. Like, basically, they take up a lot of space, but they're not a lot of calories. A high volume food with a low calorie food is what I was trying to look for. Some things like fruits, they will come with a little bit more calories, right? So if you're eating something like a an apple or a pineapple or a mango, and don't be scared of those, obviously, in the right season or the right areas. Like I'm going to Maui in 2 weeks, and I'll be eating a lot of both of those. But maybe not eating those year round or in the wintertime, especially if you live here in Northern California. But raspberries, blueberries, go for those. I mean, they're so low calorie, they're so low glycemic, they're so high in fiber compared to other fruit. Avocados, I'm like probably one of the biggest fans of avocados. I eat them all the time. I'm going to eat one right now, literally right after this, with some ground beef and some rice. But make that the big focus, right? Because not only are you getting all the health benefits, all the gut health benefits, the cholesterol lowering, the blood sugar lowering, the fullness, the digestive health, all that shit that we just talked about, but it's the easiest perspective change you can take to your diet. It's like just cut out all the other bullshit. 80 to 90% of what you eat needs to be focused around animal protein and fibrous foods and whole food from both, right? Not processed meat or not processed vegetables or fruits or processed fiber included foods, things like that. All right, guys. Well, I hope that you got some good value out of that one as always. So I will see you guys next week. Take care. Have a good day. See you later.